and taking a proper shower and so forth. So I made sure that when Melody was here, I always smelled good. And so I ended up taking like 2 or 3 showers a day and wearing the best of clothes that I had, trying to impress her. And in one of those showers, I emerged to find out that my brother had put green dye in the shampoo. And so I had green hair and green forehead and green neck and green scalp, and that was the moment when my brother disappeared and he was never to be seen from again. But sibling rivalry is something that we could always laugh at. In some families, it has a great story to say. But in some other families, like in the one that we just read this morning from the book of Genesis, it leads to murderous thoughts. And murderous thoughts are actually quite sinful. Here, the sibling rivalry between Esau and Jacob became more than just for number one. It passed a line that made Esau so upset that he most likely couldn't recover. And we see also the parents, how the parents are to blame for this. We see their mother, Rebekah, helping her favorite son, Jacob, receive a blessing. And then you see Isaac trying to lean towards his favorite to receive a blessing. And so you see how in this dysfunctional family, how they function in such a way that it creates a certain amount of more than just competition between the brothers, but really a spirit of animosity. And the spirit of animosity has Jacob running for his life. He ends up going to the wilderness. And the wilderness in the scriptures represent the rock bottom, represent the lowest point, especially in this story. Jacob hit rock bottom. And such was rock bottom that he needed a stone as his pillow. Imagine having a rock as your pillow. And it is there that he examined what he did. I'm sure he came face to face with his transgressions. And it is there that he got a glimpse of the divine. He got a glimpse of God. And it is to be noted that God was not judging. God was not reprimanding. God was not angry. God didn't tell him, hey, you've been a bad person. You need to go make amends with your brother. None of that. God is almost indifferent. Doesn't even address it. Doesn't even bring it up. Instead, God delivers a blessing. The same blessing given to Abraham, his grandfather. And that is that your descendants will be multiple. Well, there will be so many of them they'll be like the dust of the earth. But then the blessing goes on just a bit further. It says another sentence that Abraham didn't get. And that is, wherever you go, I will be there with you. That is very reassuring to know that wherever we go, God is there with us. As a point of historical context, that's actually a very important thing to bring up. Because back then, it was a polytheistic world. Polytheism was everywhere, and everything points to that family still being a polytheistic family. They were holding on to Yahweh. They were holding on to their one true God. But they thought that there were other gods elsewhere. They had a view of the gods as being a bit tribal. So if I leave my tribe, if I leave my region, and I venture into another land, possibly the land that is populated by another tribe, I will encounter another god. And that might be very scary. And so because Jacob was traveling, Jacob was running for his life and going into other lands, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac had to reassure him, wherever you go, I will be there with you. This is the first view that we get of a God that has no bounds, a God that goes beyond the man-made limitations, that regardless of the frontier, be it physical or metaphorical, God is there for us and with us. And so it is that in this rock bottom moment that the lineage of Judaism runs through Jacob. And all of the Jewish religion follows their lineage through him. And Jacob became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's a story that we'll get into next week. But for now, we're focusing on the two brothers. And Esau stayed behind while Jacob had to run for his life. Esau stayed behind tending to the animals and tending to the flocks, while then Jacob had this vision with God and went on to meet with his uncle and and that family to find his wife. And the one who stayed behind, there's not much written about him. There's not much written about the travails of Esau. Just enough to give us a glimpse of what his mindset was and what is it that he was thinking and what is it that he did. But possibly the most touching line for me came from Esau when he said, "Is there no blessing for me?" I could picture it full of grief and anger. I could just hear it coming from the very, very depth of his soul. He's been cheated, he's been robbed, and he screams out, "Father, is there no blessing for me?" I got to tell you, there's not much virtue there for Isaac as parenthood goes. Not only has he been the kind of parent that has favorites, but now when his son is at the most vulnerable state, crying out for a blessing, if you were to go back and read the blessing that he gives him, it sounds more like a curse. Where the first blessing was, the earth's dew and richness will be with you, and you'll be able to command and have dominion over all men, and I'll be there with you. And the second blessing is the opposite. It's the opposite of it all. And so we could see why Esau held a grudge. And it's a grudge that he held on to for quite some time, and it's a grudge that, quite frankly, struck fear in the heart of Jacob. And it's a fear that we'll see next week, or unless you want to read ahead in the book of Genesis, stayed with him for decades. And so decades later, when he's returning home, he's still afraid. He's afraid of his brother. That kind of fear divides families. That kind of grudge keeps people apart. Now, there are many modern-day Esau's with us. There are many people who have been cheated and robbed from that which was rightfully theirs. We know them. We've seen them. They might belong in our family, in our community, in our church. I've got to tell you the truth. I think every individual at one point or another is a modern-day Esau. It is part of the human experience that you get robbed of something that should have been yours. You get wronged at some point, and you feel that there needs to be justice. The thing about holding a grudge is that eventually it wears away at those things that we call Christian virtues. Holding a grudge divides families, keeps brothers apart, and for the most part, changes the individual who's holding the grudge in such a way that it keeps that person from experiencing happiness as well, and those around him or her. We know of too many families that have been traumatized by the grudges that they hold, whether it be in a feud or whether it be just a constant squabble. We see it in the news. We hear it day to day. As a pastor who's been dealing with people for 20 years, I'll tell you that it's one of the most important things that we could do in order to get closer to God, and that is to let go of the grudges, to be able to forgive, because it gets in the way of our relationship with God. And it is a choice. Holding a grudge is an intentional choice. It is not natural for us to hold grudges. And you know how we know that it's not natural is the way that we look at children. Take a look at a child. They're angry one day with their playmate, but then the next day, possibly even the next moment, they release that grudge and they play again. Sometimes the child goes home to tell the parents, "You know what Johnny did to me? Johnny did this, that, and the other." And sometimes the parents teach the child how to even the score. Sometimes they teach the child how to get back at Johnny. And sometimes the child doesn't do that. Sometimes the child just wants to play. Jesus told us that it's not until we become like a child that we could enter the kingdom of heaven. I think that's one of those qualities that Jesus was referring to, that we must be able to forgive and let go of grudges. so that we can enjoy all of creation. We can enjoy the love of God that truly makes us happy and share it with others. Happiness is best when it's shared. And so I've got a few points here on how we could be intentionally happy. Now, this is not a formula for happiness. It's something that has to flow from within, but there are things that we could do. There are behaviors and disciplines and a perspective and a worldview that we could have that just might help us with the happy quotient in our lives. People who are happy focus on what they have, not on what they don't have. Very important. Very important. It's not about what we don't have, it's about what we do have. And we may have lost something very important in our lives. We may have been cheated of something, but let's take a look at what we still have. Let's take a look at the opportunities that are before us to build on what is with us. People who are happy are generous. They're generous with their time, they're generous with their resources, they're generous with their love, they're generous with their happiness, because they want the people around them to be just as joyful. Remember that happiness is not a destination, it's not a goal, it's part of the journey. It is something that happens as we move along. And we might be shooting for something really big, very important, thinking that that's going to bring us happiness, but in reality, happiness is along the way. It's in the smaller things, it's in the smaller moments. People who are happy know how to slow down. People who are happy know how to stop and smell the roses. They know how to enjoy the company and the friendship of those that are with them. If we're always running around from thing to thing, activity to activity, if we're teaching our children to always be busy, and we have them in so many different activities that the child doesn't have a chance to take a breath, then there is no room for introspection. There is no room to reflect and to take a look at the blessings that we have and why we should be grateful for them. People who are happy live in the here and the now. They live in the present. They let go of the past. They let go of the grudges in the past. And the future is there, but today is more important. People who are happy don't feel that the universe owes them something. They don't have this feeling of being entitled. They know how to forgive. They forgive those who have hurt them, and they don't hold on to the grudge. They forgive so that they can move on. They forgive so that there can be reconciliation. They forgive so that the person who needs forgiveness can experience redemption. People who are happy have a certain attitude about them. Have this attitude that is positive. Have this attitude of, well, no matter what is happening, things will be good. I've got to tell you that this second to last point reminds me of a family story. When my family left Cuba, they were for many years cleaning floors and in the service industry. And they decided at one point or other things in Cuba aren't going to change. So they said, let's get the family business together again. And let's just go ahead and build what we used to do back in Cuba here. And my uncle was a very savvy man, very intelligent man. And he found a grant from the federal government for a new business, for a new business start. And it was a $5,000 grant. This was like the year 1967. So $5,000 then was worth a lot more than it is today. And with those $5,000, they moved to Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, but they speak Spanish there, and they were able to create the family business. And he created an empire. Actually, it was an amazing business. It kind of like took over. And then one day, the building burnt down. Everything that they had built was turned into ashes and rubble. And remember, the entire family, this is the livelihood of everybody, because we were all riding on our uncle's coattails and the business that he had built, of which my mother was a secretary, and my grandfather was the accountant, and my granduncle was something else. Everybody in the family was working there. And we went there to see the building just go up in flames, and my uncle starts to laugh. And he's laughing, and he turns around to all of us and goes, "Isn't it great?" And then, we're thinking he's lost his mind, and he goes, "Now we get a chance to do it all over again, and this time we could do it even better." That attitude was a winning attitude, because then he was able to then reformulate the business. Computers were coming in. There was this new surge from a person called Bill Gates at Microsoft, and then they were able to readapt and re-engineer the family business. Last but not least, people who are happy speak life. To speak life is to talk about the things that encourage life, the things that promote life. It's not about whining and complaining. It's not about the pettiness. It's not about the gossiping of what he did and she did and take a look at what they're doing over there. It's about the things that matter in life. People who are happy know how to focus on the positive aspects of life, and then they encourage that in others. And so on this day, as we begin what might be a difficult week, as we begin what might be a week full of challenges, let us reflect on the blessings that we have. Let us let go of those blessings that were stolen from us. Let us examine, take a look in the mirror. What are the grudges that we hold? What are the things that are keeping us from experiencing the love of God with our fellow brothers and sisters, with our community, with our neighbors, with our coworkers? And let us shoot for life. And let us find that life in such a way that it helps others experiencing it too, so that the blessings of God might be so bountiful, so abundant, that it becomes like the dust of the earth that covers us wherever we go, and that it becomes something that we breathe in, because it is part of who we are in our relationship with God. Amen.